Welcome to LHC Unplugged, where you'll hear unscripted conversations about life, faith, the Bible, and today's world with the pastors from LongHillChapel here in Chatham, New Jersey. Ready to grow in your spiritual journey? Let's dive in.
Welcome to LHC Unplugged. I'm Sarah Harrington. I'm the Director of Communications here at LongHillChapel, and I have our lead pastor, Michael Hoddy, and our Associate Pastor, Joey Monteleone. Hello, gentlemen.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. Joey, it's great to see you back.
It is good to be back. I've had a few weeks off from this podcast, but it's good to be missed and good to be back.
Did you miss us?
Very much. You know, it's not just, hey, we're making content. It's processing not only our lives, but also our spiritual walk. So it's become a key part of my my week. So yeah, definitely missed it.
If you never use the word content again,
you'll appreciate it.
This is like, you know, if you go to a restaurant and somebody is like, I'm making sustenance. I can't think of other words.
I don't know.
That's a good one, though.
Yeah, the last time I've heard that word, but yeah.
I'm making nutrients.
No more content.
I'd like a large nutrients, please.
Hold the fries.
Okay, so speaking of fries and stuff you could buy at a stadium, it's our Super Bowl week, you guys. Happy Easter.
That was the best segue you've ever done.
Thank you.
I was like, wait, are we talking about baseball? And I'm like, oh,
wow,
we're not.
What a reach. But you landed it. That was great.
Thanks so much.
It is Super Bowl week. It's Easter. It's crazy. It came up really fast. I was just saying to one of our other staff members, we're done with March. A quarter of the year is gone already. But my favorite time of the year, particularly as a pastor, it's Easter. It's chaos, but it's some of the best, most meaningful services, some of the best opportunities to really connect with kind of who we are as Christians. Why do we have hope? Why do we celebrate the way we do? Because Jesus is alive, and this is the time of the year we get to celebrate that.
Yeah, I was wondering, as pastors, what is this week like for you guys?
As I've gotten older, I've been at this a while. I feel like the elder statesman here sometimes. Like, you know, I'm the back in my day kind of person, but I got involved in church ministry pretty young. I was, you know, playing music and doing things in the church on a regular basis from about the age of 13 every week. And I loved Easter, like as a kid. And we would, you know, this was more traditional type of worship. And so we'd have an orchestra and the choir, and you'd kind of roll out all the things. I always have loved Good Friday as a service. And I remember, like, we had these two church services, and the first one was 8 a.m. Ooh. And I was a typical teenager who didn't really like to wake up, but I realized the importance of it. So I put my alarm clock in a box with like this sound sensor thing that you could plug something into. And I put like a 500-watt spotlight plugged into the thing so that when the alarm clock went off, it was just like, bah!
This is your version of the opening of Back to the Future.
It's like, I need to get up and I need to not press snooze. And I put it, you know, way away from me. And I'm still a little scarred by that, but I definitely made it to church on time.
It's funny you mentioned the 8 o'clock. I hadn't thought about this in years. The tradition I grew up in, we did have a sunrise service for Easter. And I know a lot of churches do that, but we haven't done that in a very long time.
Because it's cold out.
It is cold, and nobody wants to be at church ready to sing something or engage with something at 7:30.
Yeah, and there's something beautiful about it. It is also cold.
Sure.
But all that to say, like, I kind of grew up in this, like you said, the Super Bowl idea. And I don't think necessarily from a theological standpoint, the resurrection of Jesus is the ball game, to keep the analogy going. It's the whole thing. If you don't have that, the rest of this is useless. The scriptures actually say that, you know, if Jesus Christ has not been raised, then your faith
is in vain.
It has no point. It has no use or purpose. As I've gotten older, I think celebrating this as an event and as a grounding is super important. Making like a big spectacle out of it, I don't know. I'm maybe not in the same, the biggest spectacle, like the explosions and light show kind of phase of that anymore.
Yeah, I'm not in that either, but I've definitely recaptured. I very similarly grew up in church like you. This is just, you know, what we did every year. And over time, particularly now as a calling and what I do full time, this has become more meaningful to me. in that we get to create spaces where people can connect to the beauty of the resurrection in a way that's just different. It's not better or worse. It's just different when it's kind of your focus. You think back a couple months ago, we did our Beyond Our Walls conference. And it's not that we don't talk about missions throughout the year. Of course we do. But when there's a focus on it, it actually takes on a new value and a new importance. And I think the resurrection's a lot like that, where when we get to stop for 2 weeks and say, this is the time of year that we pause and we recognize Jesus gave himself for us, and not just gave himself on a cross, but rose 3 days later. That's the ball game. That does something to me, like the excitement, the passion. Not that we have to go, renting helicopters and going crazy, but do we understand what this is? And if so, let's respond appropriately. Let's sing a little bit louder. Let's preach a little bit better. Let's make sure that what we're doing reflects the importance and the value of what we say we believe.
There's a spectacle, but it has to be the right spectacle.
Absolutely.
Because if you think about, I was going to tell a story. There was one church I was part of. This did not happen, but one of the ideas that came out of it was that we were going to get a helicopter to fly over, and the Easter Bunny was going to parachute out of the helicopter into the middle of the egg hunt, which just seems terrifying. And I'm glad it didn't happen.
That's wild.
It is what it was a lot. It was at a time where that's kind of what churches were doing a little more, just kind of trying to outdo themselves. But the whole point of this is the right spectacle, because every religion has a teacher. Some of them even have teachers who have died. None of them have someone who, first of all, claimed to be the Son of God, and second of all, was raised from the dead. That is the distinctive thing about Christianity, about the Christian faith, is that thing. All the other things, there's maybe some similarities to, but that's the part where it's hard to grapple with because it is so novel. It's a claim that doesn't happen every day, but it's also the linchpin of everything that makes our hope not just a hope based on a more enlightened way of living, but actually on one who came to die for our sins and rose again and defeated the power of sin, death, and the grave, and therefore did what we could not do so that we can live in a way that we could not have ever lived and embrace an abundant eternal life that we couldn't have had.
So basically, our soft opening to this week is Palm Sunday.
Yep.
And Pastor Joey, you preached about how we ask Jesus to fix our situations, but he comes to fix our separations. So go into that a little bit more.
Yeah, so the passage we were looking at was in Luke 19, and it's what's called the triumphal entry. And Jesus is coming into the city of Jerusalem, and he kind of preps his disciples, and he says, look, I'm going to need a donkey, and this is where you're going to find it. So go into the town, go to this place. He tells them exactly where to go. It's kind of like Mission Impossible.
Perfectly normal request.
Total normal. It's like, you're going to go into this town, you're going to find this donkey right here, and if anybody gives you any trouble, just say, the Lord needs it. That's exactly what happens. They go in, they find the donkey, and the owners are like, what are you doing with my donkey? And they say, the Lord needs it. And apparently that's cool. I've never tried that with anything.
You should try that.
But, there's a first time for everything. So they come, they bring Jesus the donkey, and he rides it into Jerusalem, which is actually, as we talked about in the sermon, it's a prophecy fulfillment from the book of Zechariah. And what's interesting is that the people start praising. They start rejoicing, and they're crying out. They're saying, Hosanna, which means save us. But what they're saying is save us from our situation. They're looking at their Roman occupation. They're looking at the military that's kind of invaded. They're looking at wild taxation. Everything is going wrong for them. And so the way they see Jesus is kind of this salvation from their situation. And unfortunately, that's not a biblical issue alone. We do the same thing. We look at Jesus as though he's here to fix just our situations. Yet within the passage, Jesus is here as a symbol of peace. We went into this with the sermon, the entire imagery of the donkey. If you were a conquering king, if you were a Messiah, if you were going to save people and you actually did that act, like you went to war and you redeemed your people, you would ride in on a horse. You would ride in on a stallion, because that said, I crushed the enemy. That said, I have power, I have strength. You don't ride in on a donkey.
Totally underwhelming.
Totally underwhelming. And what's interesting is everybody would have known what that meant. But they missed it. They missed the fact that he's not riding in victorious in the way that they thought. He's actually riding in as a symbol of peace. And so he's very subtly communicating, and not so subtly communicating as well, that the thing you think you're asking for, the thing you think you need, I'm not actually here for that. I'm here for something different. it should pause us in our regular lives, because I think we often look at Jesus as this thing that's just going to fix our situations. We pray for things. We ask for salvation from all types of things, for financial stuff, for our kids, for our situations, health-related stuff. Now, again, that's not bad. We should. God tells us, bring your requests before God. And very often he does answer those things. But the problem is when we approach God as though he's a genie in a bottle, that he's just here to answer all of my needs, quote unquote, we subtly, one, miss who he really is and why he came, but we also start confusing this word need. And it's a tough word because we need all sorts of things. I need to win my bracket, which we didn't talk about yet, but I have a bracket and you guys, or Pastor Michael doesn't.
Yeah, I was impressed. For context, we have periodically poked fun at Pastor Joey for his lack of sports understanding, but he shows up this week with a March Madness bracket, which I do not have.
And
you probably do, Sarah,
I do,
right?
but I feel like...
Are you in third?
I'm proud. I am actually.
Oh, are you?
So, yeah.
Nice.
But there's less people in our group. But I'm like proud of Pastor Michael and myself. I feel like we've had a positive influence in this direction.
Yeah, no, this is discipleship, 100%.
Great.
But I need to win, right? That's not a real need. It's something I want. But would I pray to God that I win the bracket? You know, I'm obviously poking fun at it, but we confuse what we really need with what we want. And that's really where it becomes dangerous for us as followers of Jesus, because if we can't differentiate why Jesus came and what he truly offers, then the things that we want, the things that we need become these functional saviors. They become the thing that will bring us peace, will bring us joy, will bring us happiness. As long as God answers things the way that we want him to, then we'll be happy, then we'll be secure. And the problem with that is that's not why he exists. He becomes a God that we are able to place in a box. And then is he God at all? Well, of course not. It's a stunning, very potent example of him riding in, and they're screaming, they're crying out for salvation. And he's like, yeah, that's what I'm here for, but it's not the way you think.
You talked about the donkey and that whole setup being a symbol of peace. Talk a little more about kind of what that actually means versus what we think it means.
You know, like we said, when conquering kings would ride in, they would ride in as a symbol of their conquest. And when Jesus is riding in, he is demonstrating that even if you look at the passage, the people are crying out, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord." Is that true? Well, yes, it is. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest. Is that true? Absolutely. If you go back in the sermon, we pointed out that the book of Luke has peace all over it. It shows up when Jesus first arrives. The angels say, "Peace on earth." We talk about that at Christmas time. Anytime Jesus blesses somebody or heals somebody, go in peace. There's a peace motif going here. And what's interesting is that the city, Jerusalem, is kind of this imagery of the city of God. It's where the temple is. It's where people meet to make sacrifices, to gather as God's people. And so Jesus is riding in on a donkey into the city of God. And so on this really kind of, it's almost like an Easter egg that's happening here. You have the Son of God riding in on a peace symbol into the city of God where God is. And so he's acting as this mediator between the people and God, saying, I'm making a peace offering in the name of God. And they're missing it. If you keep going down into the passage, he actually weeps because he says, you don't even realize what's going on here. If you would only have known what brings you peace, you don't know what's going on right now. You can't see that I'm not riding in as your political savior. I'm not riding in just to make your situations better. I'm riding in as the salvation, the atonement for the thing that's actually the problem, which is the separation between you and God. And I'm doing it in the city of God. Like, there's so many meta levels to this thing. And he says, you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you. And it cuts him. It cuts him deeply because he's here for one reason. He's here because he loves us, because he's providing salvation, and they can't see it. And all they're saying is, yeah, kick the bad guys out of the political power. And it is crushing to him. And I think the invitation for us even now is to look at a thing like that and say, God, how am I missing you? How you really want to show up as salvation in my life, not just the things that I think. Because here's the other thing too. He still gives them salvation even though they missed it. Even though they're like, oh yeah, we want this thing and we want it this way. What's also interesting is the same crowd that's shouting Hosanna is the same crowd that in 5 days shout crucify.
Yeah, it's not different people.
Same people, right? So the second he doesn't deliver, they turn on him. Do we have the tendency to do that? What pops up in your life when God doesn't deliver the way you think? But the invitation, I think, of Palm Sunday and what I see in this passage is that there's a bigger salvation that God is always writing. Do we have eyes to see it? Or are we so limited by what we think it needs to look like? There's a sobering reality to just be aware of what God is actually here for as opposed to what I've made him.
Yeah, as you were saying a lot of those things, I was thinking about the fact that those people wanted peace.
They did.
They did. They had a very particular version of what that looked like. And here comes Jesus, who in all the ways you talked about was to bring that peace.
Yeah.
But peace isn't the resolution of our problems. It's the reconciliation of our relationship.
Yeah.
And in the New Testament says about Jesus, it says, for he himself is our peace. So it's not our situation somehow being resolved in the way that we like, and therefore we feel less agitated about it. It's actually the reconciliation of something that we don't even necessarily know needs to be reconciled.
And what's interesting that you bring that up is we attach our peace and our stability to these external things that we're not even in control of. And God has provided the ultimate peace for the thing that we're still not in control of. Right? So we try to attach our security to the things that we think will bring us peace. And even if we get them, ultimately, they don't offer peace. Yet, the salvation found in Jesus, the peace that we now have with God that we couldn't do for ourselves is the thing that he freely offers. And he says they missed it. And our invitation is to not miss it.
And you were talking about needs and wants. And I feel like, as parents, all of us are parents in this room, we have to kind of explain that to our kids. What is your need versus your want? Same way, we kind of have to teach them cause and effect or use those if-then statements. But you mentioned the word control. So talk to me about control when it comes to the if-then statements that people make.
Yeah, the thing with control is it shows up at all the wrong times, and we don't think we're doing it. We don't think we're necessarily having control issues. When I come to God and I say, God, would you please, work on my behalf in this regard? There is a very genuine ask that's underneath that. And, let's not dismiss that. There's a non-threatening coming to God that says, I recognize our power dynamic here. You're in control and I'm not. If I'm not careful, I actually just did this with my kids last night. If I'm not careful, if the only thing I'm asking of God is, can you give me this? Then what I'm actually doing is not just turning God into a genie that says, give me, give me, give me, but I'm actually saying I need to control my environment because I will not be good unless I'm in control. And I've determined what those criteria are. I need good health. I need good finances. I need good job security. I need good weather. You can see it very honestly and genuinely with children. The prayers that my kids usually pray are something like, give us a good day tomorrow. Help us not to fight. Help us to do this. Help us get our school done. And those are good prayers that, it's kind of very elementary. At the same time, one of the things I gave them was, don't just ask God to make your life easy. Because what are we actually doing with that? We're telling God that our response to him will be good when things are good for us. And if it's not, then I don't know where we stand. Now, none of us would say, oh, I would be in the crowd crying out, crucify. I don't think those people who shouted Hosanna thought they would be doing that either. It's a subtle thing that when we don't have control, we will very easily, quickly, consistently aim to get it back.
We will go hunting for it in strange places. Like I was thinking about as you're talking about control. I'm a little bit of a high control type of person. And one of the things I do when I'm having a bad day is I'll go home and wash the dishes. And obviously a good outcome for everybody.
Yeah.
My wife Grace doesn't have to do it. There are no more dishes in the sink. But I've come to realize that there's this thing where I just need to do something that makes me feel like I have mastery over something, mastery over some part of my destiny or my situation. And it's actually because there's all these other places where I don't.
It's vacuuming for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's the same thing. You kind of come in and you've gotten to the end of the day, the kids are bouncing off the walls, there's a mess, and you can help clean it up, and that's great. But what's underneath that? Yeah, there's some good things, there's good outcomes that come from it, but what am I actually trying to do? I'm trying to get control back. I said this in a sermon years ago, and I've never forgot it. I'll pat myself on the back.
That was a good sermon for you.
It was a good sermon for me. When I fall short and yell at my kids for their behavior, is it because of the behavior? No, it's because I feel out of control of the situation. And I've had to check myself more times than not. Am I raising my voice because they're in danger? Am I raising my voice because they've been blatantly disobedient? Or do you just feel out of control? parenting is hard. It becomes increasingly harder when you're self-aware that you're going into this thing not because of the kids, but because of you.
Yeah.
And that's the hard thing with our spiritual journeys is like the longer you get into this, the more you develop this, the more you see Jesus for who he truly is. You start to say, oh, this isn't about that thing. It's actually about me. And so when they're crying out, Hosanna, yeah, they're responding to the real fulfillment of a prophecy, but they're missing it because what they're trying to do is prop Jesus up in a position that gives them control.
And I think it's funny you're talking about control. I think there's even another layer down below it. And you can see that kind of in my dishwashing or your vacuuming or us yelling at our kids. And I felt the same thing. I'm like, the reason I am so hopped up on this thing that my kids are doing is not because of them. Maybe they shouldn't be doing it, but it's because it speaks to something in me that I don't like. Mm-hmm. And there's this thing with control, I think, where, there's the thing we're trying to control, whatever it is, but it touches a deeper reality that we can't resolve.
Yeah.
And that drives us nuts. And I think probably for the early people who are in this triumphal entry and then a few days later yelling crucify, there's this awareness of a deeper reality that we can't resolve. I think that's part of the human condition. And many people just spend their entire lives trying to, apart from Jesus, figure out the things that will resolve the deeper reality, the understanding of limitedness, the understanding of mortality, the understanding of brokenness that we have that we would love to not admit. And that just manifests in all sorts of other ways where in this story, the people are like, okay, you got some problems. The Romans are a problem. Taxation's a problem. We don't like this. Our national identity has been compromised. Here's someone who's going to fix the stuff that we want fixed. And then he proceeds to not do that the way that they wanted to. So actually what they do is they go find someone else. There's this famous scene in the crucifixion where this man Barabbas is released to the people. Pilate, the governor says, do you want this guy or do you want Jesus? They're like, we want this guy. And he was an insurrectionist. He was a violent, just someone who was trying to fight against and overthrow the Romans. And they were like, you know what? This is closer to what we want because it feels like something's happening here and now that gets at all of the things and gets at that underneath issue that says, I don't have the amount of mastery over my life that I'd even like to tell myself that I do. Mm. And so we go from insurrection to yelling at our kids, but it's all manifestations of the same root issue that's in our hearts.
Right.
And it's hard because that has, again, we talk about kind of turning the mirror on ourselves a lot in this podcast. And that's one of those things where you have to stop pointing at the people over there. It's them, it's them, it's them. And you have to say, oh, no, wait, this is a me thing. Mm-hmm.
And this is ironic, like one of the most common Christian tropes that Christians are known for, surveys say we're known for, is pointing the finger over there. You're saying, well, those people who are doing that thing, they need to stop doing that thing. If they stop doing that thing, everything would be great. It's the same thing, just dressed up in religiosity, because it doesn't require us to confront the peace that God has come to bring in our hearts, the reconciliation, the end of the war, versus all of the other things we think that will bring us peace.
Well, and I think that's what's most interesting about this story in particular, how it then pans out with the Barabbas angle.
That sounds like that's like a Jason Bourne movie, the Barabbas angle.
I'd watch that.
I bet that's a dad movie.
That is a total dad movie.
Got it.
The Barabbas angle. But I was talking with him about having spiritual conversations versus Jesus conversations. And the reason that Jesus conversations are so difficult is because you're faced with a choice. You don't get out of escaping the look into the mirror that Jesus demands. And that's really what's going on here. When you get to the end of the story, they picked the choice that made their lives easier, because that's really what they were asking for, not the look into the mirror that says, actually, there's something broken with me. Actually, there's a part of me that I can't fix, and I need to come to God and surrender and admit that I need saving. That's what Jesus, to understand Jesus fully, truly, as he is, he confronts. That's what he does. The holiness of God, the perfection of his life, the things that he said, the way that he lived, how he gave himself up, all of it demands a response. He's not a neutral individual. So the people, the theology, the philosophy that just says, well, he was a nice person and said some nice things. No, he demands that you respond to what he claimed. And what he claimed was, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So either, he's just something that goes on a bumper sticker, or there's implications. And those implications mean I have to respond to that.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis had this, famous, is he a lunatic, is he a liar, or is he Lord? And the reason for that is you don't get to make Jesus the nice moral teacher who tells you nice things so you live a better life and are, don't cut people off in traffic and, are happier and whatever else. He just doesn't give you that option because of the claims he makes about himself, which are those claims that he is the Son of God and that he came to give himself as a ransom for many. The other thing I was thinking about with the control thing is the things we go to establish control don't actually bring us peace, ultimately. And they picked Barabbas. Did Barabbas bring them peace? Did Barabbas resolve their situation? Not even a little bit.
Not even in the peace with God aspect, of course not, because he couldn't, but even in the political thing, right? The situation didn't improve. And how often is that the case for us too? The things that we go to regain control, to give us peace, don't actually provide that. I think I mentioned it in the sermon. You can get all the things that you want and still not have peace with God, and you cannot get all of those things that you want and have peace with God. The question is, which one would you prefer? The peace that Jesus offers because of the sacrifice he gave when we couldn't, or do you want your checklist exactly how you want it?
I have a story that is going to take us way off course, and it's going to be amazing. 10 years ago, a game called Pokemon Go came onto the scene, and there was all these people walking around with their smartphones and catching
one
Pokemon,
of those people.
And I was, and I still am.
I'm proud of you.
I have caught maybe 70,000 of them.
That is impressive.
And I've realized it gets me outside walking around. That's the thing I tell myself.
Is that why you go on walks?
It's one of the reasons. Yeah, it gives me something to do.
You're my hero.
But it's been such a reflection, like a mirror for my life.
Yeah.
And a mirror for our existence, because there's always more Pokemon you think you need to catch. And they'll come out with new ones sometimes. And over time, you've discovered they're really just the same as the other ones. They just changed the color of it or made it still jumps up and down like the other one did. And it's just been a good reflection of saying, look, this never ends. Like the Pokemon change, but you're always trying to catch them all.
Right.
And it started, there were a couple hundred. Now there's like 1,000 different ones or something. There's just a bunch you can catch. And there's never a point where you say like, you know what? I've caught enough of these things. I'm good.
And what that speaks to is there's the thing you're trying to catch, but then there's the catching, right? I heard a comedian, he was talking about compulsive buying. He's like, it's not interesting to receive your Amazon purchases. It's interesting to be searching for something.
Yes, the thrill of the chase.
It's the dopamine hit, right? Like, so we are designed by nature, by humanity, to be pursuing something. Why wouldn't we pursue something that actually gives us a return? Peace with God, love for humanity, because of the love that God has given to us. The list goes on with spiritual disciplines that we could pour ourselves into, and yet we pour ourselves into these temporary things that ultimately don't offer peace, don't change the world, and make us very insular, selfish people. Why wouldn't we understand that because we're designed to chase after something that actually delivers?
And you'd think we'd know better, right?
You'd think.
But here we are. And that's why I think that's actually a reason that Easter is so important, because it comes around every year. And if we are considering this the right way as followers of Jesus, it brings us back to that. It brings us back to the fact that another year has passed in our lives and we've pursued a whole bunch of different things. But there's this one thing. There's the only one thing that brings us peace with God, that actually allows us to live at peace in our hearts and then live a life that radiates that out into the world. And it's a reminder, even though the songs may be similar, the service and the egg hunt and all the trappings that you're used to, going to brunch afterwards, those are great. There's this thing in the middle of it that is unlike, just like the claims of Jesus and the claims of Christianity are unlike other things. There's this thing that is unlike all of the other things, that if we return to it, that's where we find peace with God.
Well, thanks everyone for listening to LHC Unplugged. As a reminder, we meet in person on Sunday mornings at 10:15 at LongHillChapel in Chatham, New Jersey. We also live stream our service, so you can also listen online at 10:15 on Sundays at lhcnj.net. And if you have any questions for our pastors to answer on our podcast, you can send them right to us at questions@lhcnj.net. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to having you next time.